The Cell, a short story written and performed by Jane Holland. My cell is the pillar of fire where God spoke to Moses. It's the furnace I stand in morning and evening, an intolerable column of flame between me and God. Some days I pack up my meagre belongings in a sack and peer out at the desert. I stand in the doorway and press imaginary footprints into the sand, a journey that stretches all the way back to my old life. My hated cell shrinks in the distance, nothing but a hot, dusty hell I've crouched in these 17 years. When evening falls, I close the door and comb out the sand from my hair. Extinguishing the lamp, I lay down my sack for a pillow and praise God, saying, "Tomorrow, Lord, tomorrow." Some months I'm visited by one or two of the other sisters. Often they bring a donkey carrying sacks of flour and dried pulses, and sometimes a pot of fresh honey from my supplies. I tell them that I intend to leave, and they weep for me. Sometimes the venerable head of our order sends a note with the sisters to strengthen my resolve or impart some private information. Once or twice a year, Abba Macarius comes to me in person, a shadow falling over the stone lintel in the late morning. It's an honour to receive his visits. We sit together in the shade and I offer him honey cakes. He relates an anecdote or points to a phrase in the scriptures, asks me to consider it. Sometimes we kneel side by side and make our personal devotions. When I look up sometime later, I often find that the Abba has gone as silently as he arrived. My stone cell yawns in the afternoon silence, as hot and stifling as ever. I'm never sure if these visits help or hinder my progress. I'm glad of them for sure. My soul leaps for joy at the sound of a human voice, and my foolish vanity enjoys the Abba's flattering attentions, however fleeting. But afterwards, in the long stillness of the night, I recall each word spoken and regret them all. My pride asserts itself after these visits. It presses vicious thorns deep into my flesh, making me imagine, dream, recast each meeting until it shows me to best advantage. The least worldly of our order, the most pious, the Abba's favourite. Mostly, though, peace falls from my mind, and I begin to remember how it feels to be alive in the world. My desire increases and pains me. The struggle to cage it becomes harder, almost impossible. Some days the lure of the shimmering heat haze horizon burns my eyes like the desert burns my feet through my sandals. It can take weeks for equilibrium to return, for will to exert itself over my dizzying desire. Yet even will can corrupt the unwary, for it is the individual will, not the will of God, to which the body bows. By speaking, I weaken myself. Silence is the narrow way. Following a visit from Abba Macarius, I keep the cell door closed during the cooler hours when walking outside would be possible, afraid of my own weakness. Gradually, the stirred air of my cell settles. The humble stone walls and floor are my own again. Soon I find myself able to pray without distraction and begin to follow the prayer cycles and meditations that Abba Macarius has recommended for such trials. I sit cross-legged for days on end, examining one solitary word of the Lord's teaching until it becomes as vast and complex in my understanding as creation itself. At such miraculous times, I feel his presence so near to me. It seems incredible that almost 300 years have passed since he gave his life for mankind. Finally, the day comes when I can open the door once more in daylight and breathe the fresh air, stare out at the sand dunes and distant ridges without regret. My peace improves as I focus on the searing fire of God's presence in my life. Some days I eat nothing but dampened leaves. Other days I take only sufficient water to keep me conscious and able to pray. I find the less I consume, the greater my resolve. Each morning I examine my arms and legs for spare flesh. My body should be a bird's skeleton cupped in a stone palm, to be hollowed out by God's purpose and played upon like a flute as his will demands. This is what I struggle towards as I try to meet him in everything. I forget that my feet work. I'm so often on my knees in prayer, and when I stand, my body lists and drifts. But I ignore physical weakness. Spiritual strength is all that matters in this world. My spine is a ladder where sin may clamber up or vilely descend, and I am determined to conquer my own primitive urge to accommodate it. Some days I wake to find myself on the floor of my cell when I can't remember having made the decision to sleep. But a sip or two of water soon returns me to prayer and the path. I am a handful of sand on the desert wind, anchored to this world by nothing but the fine cord of contemplation. Sometimes it's all I can do to prevent myself from floating away as I cross from one side of my cell to the other. Yet I know that I must take no pride in the extremity of my position. The Abba warned us of this before we left to seek solitude. Extremity of any kind, even in devotion to God, is the work of the devil. When I sense pride rising at my own severity, I strip down to bare skin, kneel on the sand underneath the midday sun, and I beat myself across the back with a bundle of dry sticks until blood comes. My skin burns and I can't lie on my back for days afterwards. But the pain steadies me. I praise God with every blow and beg his forgiveness for my vanity. The sense of humility that follows such chastisement of the flesh is quite astonishing. I thank the Lord for the blessing of that solace. The way is never easy, though. Sometimes visions come, terrible in the great solitude of the desert. I fear the visions, but know it's part of our testing to watch and learn from them. A bird lands on the stone threshold of my cell and stares at me, a black hooded vulture, its wing feathers tattered from a fight. Its eye seems to know me, as only God could know me. It grows taller and taller, blocking out the light until I look up and see the silhouette of Abba Macarius in the doorway. He watches me from beneath the cowl of his hood. The Abba comes in and sits opposite me, his face unreadable in shadow. I find myself burningly conscious of not being fully clothed, having stripped down for the heat. Yet I know this womanly weakness is part of my test. We sit there for days, both determined not to weaken, my back and limbs sweating with the rigour of holding myself upright, my mouth constantly moving in silent prayer. The moon rises and sets 3 times over silvered sands while we face each other. Yet I dare not give in to my physical needs in case the devil uses my human weakness to corrupt me. On the 4th day, just as the sun is rising, I look up to find Abba Macarius gone and the vulture in his place again. It croaks once, then flaps up the step and away into the morning, like a tattered robe swirling about an old man's ankles. I sit there trembling until midday, just to be sure that I have passed the test. Then I take a little water and allow myself to sleep at last. I can barely remember my old life now. Once I was young and felt proud to be considered beautiful. Such folly. I even intended to marry, but the man my father had chosen married another. Then my father died, and God spoke to me in the night. That was when I came to the desert and sought out the Abba's advice. It was another Abba then, not Macarius, but Abba Moenus was as wise as he was old, and he set me on the path. The first 10 years of solitude were the hardest to endure. Yet the equilibrium that I finally achieved seems more difficult to maintain with every year that passes. Abba Macarius is a deeply spiritual man, and younger than most Abbas, the vital, central pillar of our order. Yet my life in the cell feels harder now, and the visions come more frequently to torment me. This shameful weakness is not something I would ever voice, except perhaps in prayer. But I found fewer temptations under the old Abba. When I awake, evening has fallen again. I close the door to my narrow cell and comb the sand out of my hair. Extinguishing the lamp, I lay down and praise God, saying, "Tomorrow, Lord, tomorrow." That was The Cell, a short story written and performed by Jane Holland. The Cell was first published in Overheard, Stories to Read Aloud, a collection edited by Jonathan Taylor from Salt Publishing. I later took this short story and transformed it into the opening chapters of a sci-fi novel, which is still ongoing.